In this video, I'm going to tell you about my new Elfman Tactical Match Pro SE flat trigger and my experience installing them in both the APC223 and the APC9 from B&T. Hey everybody, Sean Burrows with B&T USA and Team Federal. Now, if you're not familiar with B&T guns, they are unique unto themselves, but they're compatible with mil-spec AR style triggers. But the Match Pro SE is no regular mil-spec trigger. See, like Elfman's other offerings, it is a drop-in solution with sealed bearings. You can adjust the pull weight of the trigger with a twist of a screw. But unlike other drop-in solutions on the market, this one has the new Pro-Lock threaded mounting system. That's right, threads, as in screws, as in no pins. Now, Art Elfman and his team tell me that this is the most solid trigger solution anyone could possibly put into a gas gun. And like they say, the beginning of every good shot begins with the trigger press. Not to mention that the same trigger will work in my 9mm, my 223, and my 308. I'm excited about the consistency that's going to give me as I jump from one platform to another at a match. But stay with me here because there are a few things we're going to have to do differently when installing this into a B&T lower. Okay, so along with your trigger, you should have four 4mm 7-pitch screws, along with washers and lock washers. Those are very important. Don't lose those. A couple of Allen keys. Yes, you need both of them. And this reinforcement plate. This is important, especially when installing it into a B&T lower, but more on that later. Now, one unique thing about B&T lower receivers is they're polymer, therefore they are a little bit thicker than what you're used to on an AR. So you're gonna have to replace those 4 screws with something slightly longer. So I just went down to Ace Hardware and replaced those 10mm long screws with 16mm long screws, and they did the trick perfectly. All right, to get this trigger installed, you have to take the old one out. In order to take the old one out, you have to remove the safety first. In order to do that, just lay your lower receiver down with the right side facing up and your safety in a fire position. Take the small punch, put it in the little hole there, and slowly and carefully slide it up. Be careful, there's a detent in there that's gonna go flying if you don't catch it. Get the cap and then the spring, set those aside. All right, now keeping the hammer in the fire position, turn the receiver over, move the safety between the fire and the safe position, and slowly work it out. There are 2 deep tents on the inside of the receiver. Keep your finger in there so nothing else goes flying out, and just slowly work the safety back and forth as you remove the crossbar out of the receiver. Now take your tweezers, remove the detents and the caps, put them in a safe place. I have a little magnetic small parts dish that I got from Brownells and it works great. Now removing the trigger is pretty easy. Get your punch, get your gunsmith hammer, punch them out. Be careful, be gentle, and then take all those factory trigger parts and put them in a bag or a piece of Tupperware and set them aside. Don't lose them. Make sure you have them all in one place, because if you ever want to return your gun to its original factory configuration, you know where everything is. Okay, and this is why you need the longer screws. See how far the 10mm screw is just not reaching, and that is without any of the washers. You could possibly use the screws that the trigger came with, but then you don't have the solid mounting that it really needs. And with the percussion of firing a gun in rapid succession, things are gonna come loose. This is not what we wanna do. We wanna install this properly. They're both high performance pieces of equipment. They deserve this extra attention to detail. Now look how far in the 16mm screw is reaching with the washer and the lock washer. We want those threads to be able to catch enough of the trigger housing to hold it solidly in place. Aren't you glad you went to Ace Hardware? Now, looking at your new Match Pro SE trigger, move the hammer in the full forward position and look at those set screws on the bottom. We want to make sure that those are completely flush with the bottom when we're first putting it into your receiver so all the holes line up. These are going to come into play a little bit later for a little bit of final solid stabilization. Okay, once the set screws are flush with the bottom of the trigger housing, take the hammer and put it into the half cock position, and then take that reinforcement plate, place it in long side forward, see how that goes in. This plate is what those set screws are going to be pushing against for that last piece of high-end stabilization that you get out of this trigger system. And the last thing you want is to have those set screws digging into your nice polymer receiver. Notice how those holes just line up? Beautiful, isn't it? So from there, not neglecting the washers and lock washers, hand tighten the screws on all 4 points of contact around the receiver. This is where you need to have both Allen keys to tighten it from both sides, and just make sure it's snug. You don't need to go crazy here. You don't need to over tighten. This is not how the system's designed. Just make sure it's finger tight. Now is where you lower those set screws into your reinforcing plate for that final piece of stabilization. Really, you have 6 points of solid stabilization here between your trigger housing and the receiver. You got the 4 holes, 2 on each side, and those set screws on the inside pushing down and up into your trigger housing and receiver. This thing's not going anywhere. I'll take some needle nose pliers and move these springs back over those set screws. These act as kind of a detent to keep things in place. So to replace the safety, just gonna do everything in reverse. Take your detents and put them into place. What's really nice is you'll see they're oval shaped and there's only really one way they can fit in. Put your springs in, put your caps on, use some tweezers, makes things a lot easier, especially if fingers as fat as mine. Then start working that crossbar in. Now, for me, it's easiest to get the crossbar in if I put it in upside down. It'll slide over those detents and then I just slide it back into the fire position. Here's where I'm going to do things a little bit differently. Instead of replacing the right side safety lever, I'm going to use an HB Industries right side safety delete cap because I have no use for that ambidextrous side in the type of shooting sports that I do. And it frankly gets in the way of my big meaty hands and slows down my ability to manipulate the gun. Now, using tweezers to put the spring and then the cap back in on this right side detent, just make sure you have something to stop that detent cap from going flying because it's really easy to lose. Now that everything's back together, it's time to fine tune and adjust the pull weight of the trigger to my liking. I like to land somewhere between 2 and 2.5 pounds. Of course, I want my PCC and my rifle to match. Same trigger, same fire controls. I want everything to be as consistent as possible. Luckily, that's really easy to do with this tiny little screw right here. Lefty loosey, righty tighty. You turn it left, it's gonna get lighter. You turn it right, it's going to get harder to pull. Trigger pull weight is as light as 2 pounds, and then it goes up from there. Once I have it close to what I like, push my last takedown pin in place, function test it a couple times, and then lose sleep with excitement until I can go to the range the next day. At least that's the plan. Regardless of pull weight, I'm just glad that I have very, very little pre-travel, no after travel, and an extremely crisp and consistent reset. There really isn't much more you can ask for in a match grade trigger, and I can't wait to shoot a match with this. If you have any questions, please write them in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned for a lot more footage coming from the range, matches, and the workbench. I'm excited to share this journey with you as I play with some awesome new guns and push them to the limit. Again, I'm Sean Burrows, and I'll see you next time. All right, this is way different than any other kind of video I've done on my channel before. This is very workbenchy, gunsmithy. Do you like this kind of stuff? I just couldn't find a resource out there anywhere else, and I wanted to share with you guys what was working for me and the things I discovered. So if you want to see more, please let me know in the comments below. If you have any requests, definitely ask. Please don't forget to subscribe, and yeah, bye.